Betrayal or destiny? The untold mystery of Judas and the gift of free will. What would you do if your neighbor destroyed something that wasn't just yours but something sacred? Something tied to lives and choices far beyond your own. It started with an iron gate. Not just any gate either. It was handmade, twisted with blacksmith's fire and prayer, bolted into a low stone wall carved from Jerusalem limestone. A replica of the one that stood outside the monastery of St. George in the Judean desert. That gate stood not just as decoration, but as a tribute. My late brother David, an army chaplain who served 3 tours, had given his life during an evacuation in Kabul. This was the last project we worked on together. Our final promise was to bring a little piece of his faith and his sacrifice home. But to Karami neighbor with a golden labradoodle and a diamond-studded clipboard, it was just non-compliant hardware. She called it a spiritual hazard. I still remember the first time she stormed up the gravel drive, heels snapping like a judge's gavel, demanding I remove it or face consequences. "You're making the whole street look apocalyptic," she huffed, clutching her HOA handbook like scripture. "This isn't some religious exhibit. This is Maple Creek Estates." I blinked. "That gate's not hurting anyone." She laughed, eyes icy. "No, it's just hurting my property value." I tried to explain. About David. About the meaning. About what that gate represented for the community we used to serve together. She didn't care. Not even when my mother, limping from chemo, sat silently beside it every sunset, whispering Psalm 91. The next morning, the gate was gone. Torn out. Stone shattered. The iron, twisted like someone had used a winch and a chain. My chest cracked open. I dropped to my knees in the dust. And sitting in its place, a note, laminated, signed, HOA Vice President Karen D. Non-compliant structure removed in accordance with community policy. Any attempts to reinstall unauthorized fixtures will result in legal action. I didn't scream. I didn't curse. I just stood up, walked inside, and turned on the security feed. The footage was worse than I imagined. Karen, in the middle of the night, with her contractor nephew wearing a HOA enforcement jacket from Etsy, hooking a steel chain around the ironwork and dragging it down with his pickup. They didn't just remove it, they defiled it. But that wasn't the twist. As I reviewed the footage frame by frame, I caught something else: a small wooden box David had sealed and hidden inside the wall. Something I never noticed before. The chain had split the stone clean through. The box had burst open. Inside, a copy of his last letter, addressed not to me but to his interpreter's daughter, Ruth, and taped to it, a notarized document ceding land rights of our entire southern Lotto, the Interfaith Refugee Alliance. David had donated it, quietly, legally. That small piece of our yard, exactly the part where Karen had just trespassed and bulldozed, was no longer just private property. It was federally protected by a registered nonprofit working with war survivors and religious exiles. Her act of destruction? It wasn't just vandalism now. It was a federal offense. But it didn't stop there. The Interfaith Alliance sent a lawyer. Then the story hit our local station. HOA president destroys veteran memorial, defaces refugee foundation land. They showed everything. The footage, the stone, the box, Karen's laminated threat. She doubled down. "It's fake. This is manipulation. This is a political trap." Then Ruth arrived. Not in a dramatic cape or anything, just in a long cotton dress and a scarf, holding the original deed David had gifted her family. She'd been living in silence ever since the Taliban took her father. Seeing the footage broke her. She flew in the next day, and she spoke. To the news, to the police, to the community. "I didn't ask for land," she said softly. "I asked God to remember my father. Your brother did. And now she desecrated both of them." People wept. Karen, meanwhile, raged harder, threatened lawsuits, accused me of forging documents. But each denial chipped away at her illusion of control. By the end of the week, 3 other families came forward. 2 of them veterans. All with complaints. All with evidence of Karen's sabotage. Wrongful fines, deleted emails, even tampering with ballots for HOA board elections. That's when the HOA board called an emergency meeting. She stormed in with her clipboard like a queen expecting to be worshipped. But this time, the room didn't rise. No one greeted her. And sitting in the front row, Ruth, my mother, and the board's attorney. Karen never saw it coming. Karen didn't go quietly. She shouted at the board members, flinging her binder on the ground. "You're all cowards. This is a setup. He's manipulating you with sob stories and immigrant guilt." The silence that followed was suffocating. Then came a quiet voice from the back. "Karen," said Mr. Eldridge, an Air Force vet and founding resident of the neighborhood, "that immigrant guilt saved my daughter's life. David's interpreter? He smuggled her out when the embassy fell." Karen scoffed. "You're all just trying to make me look like the villain." I stepped forward, not with fists, but with facts. "I didn't have to make you anything. You filmed yourself destroying sacred ground on federal protected land, then left a signed threat like it was a parking ticket." She tried to argue that the documents were fake, that the footage was altered. But every time she raised her voice, someone else in the room stepped in. A neighbor she once fined for a rose bush. A mother she berated for parking too close to her driveway. Even her own vice president, trembling, admitted she'd forged 3 complaint letters under Karen's orders. That's when the HOA lawyer stood. "Ms. Dubrow," he said, "effective immediately, your position is suspended pending full investigation. We've been notified of a civil lawsuit from the Interfaith Alliance and a criminal complaint regarding destruction of federally recognized memorial structures. You may remain silent, but I'd advise you to contact your attorney." Karen looked around as if expecting someone to leap to her defense. No one did. Not even her nephew. That twist hit her like a slap. The contractor nephew Joel had come with her that night to help pull the gate down. He'd since flipped. And under pressure from the police and with fear of felony charges on the line, he testified everything. "She said it was just some religious decoration," Joel had told the sheriff. "I didn't know it was a memorial or protected land. I wouldn't have touched it." He even turned in texts she sent him. "Just rip the damn thing down. No one's gonna cry over Bible junk." I didn't think I'd feel satisfaction, but I did. It was short-lived. Because later that week, my mother collapsed. She'd been holding so much in grief, stress, guilt, and the weight of it finally crushed her. As she lay in the hospital, tubes in her arms, she whispered, "David wanted peace, not a war." And that hit harder than any of Karen's destruction. I'd let my anger carry me through every step of this battle. But now, I just wanted to make sure David's story wasn't buried under Karen's chaos. That's when Ruth returned with an idea. She didn't just want to file suit. She wanted to rebuild the memorial. Not just the gate, but the wall, the bench, and a new plaque honoring veterans and translators lost in service. But more than that, she wanted to open the land. To turn it into a community interfaith sanctuary. For everyone, she said. Not just for the ones who made it home, but for the ones who waited. It was beautiful, and it terrified Karen. Because it made her hate look small. That's when she tried her last move spite. She called the local paper and claimed I had radicalized the neighborhood. That Ruth was funneling extremist influence. That our memorial project was a foreign infiltration effort. She even released a video of herself fake crying in her car, saying she feared for her life because the veteran across the street stares at me like I'm the enemy. But this time, no one bought it. Because the evidence was public. Ruth's nonprofit had already received approval. The city council had issued a statement supporting the project. And most damning of all, her own HOA had filed to remove her name from every single document she'd ever signed as vice president. She was officially blacklisted. The fallout was swift. First came the lawsuit, civil and criminal. Then the community petition to ban her from ever serving on any HOA board again. But perhaps the worst moment? When the mayor's office sent an ethics committee to investigate Karen's business dealings and uncovered a dozen hidden kickbacks she'd accepted in exchange for pushing certain neighborhood permits. That's when she vanished. Gone. Moved out overnight. Her house sold under market value. Word got out she was facing bankruptcy, pending charges, and had fled to Florida. People asked me if I felt like we'd won. I didn't know how to answer that. Sure, the wall was rebuilt. The gate was restored, even stronger this time, with iron reinforcements and a bronze plaque at its base that read, "Faith, memory, freedom. May we never destroy what was built with sacrifice." Ruth helped organize a dedication ceremony. Dozens of neighbors came. Veterans stood shoulder to shoulder with refugee families. My mother spoke, and for the first time in a long time I felt peace. But part of me still hears Karen's voice sometimes. That sneering laugh, that smug certainty, the belief that cruelty is a kind of power. And that's why I tell this story. Not because I want revenge, but because I believe people like Karen are louder than they are strong. And if we stay silent, they get to keep writing the rules. So let me ask you, what would you have done if someone tore down your sacred place and called it non-compliant junk? Would you fight back, forgive, or find a new way to rebuild? Because sometimes justice isn't just a verdict. It's what we choose to do after the gate has fallen. A week after the memorial was restored, Ruth returned to my porch with a quiet look on her face. She was holding David's letter, the one I'd thought was a gift to her. But now, under the soft porch light and late summer air, she said something that made the world tilt beneath my feet. "This wasn't meant for me." I blinked. "What do you mean? Your name was on it." She shook her head, carefully unfolding the weathered page. "It was, but not originally." She handed it to me, gently pointing to the corner where a second, much fainter name was scribbled beneath hers. "My name. David wrote it for you," she said. "I only added my name because I thought maybe you weren't ready to see it." I stared at the page, suddenly remembering David's handwriting. The way he'd write in the margins of books. This wasn't just a goodbye letter. It was a confession, a journal entry, prayer. "If you find this, it means I never made it back. I hope you forgive me, but I had to give the land away. You and I always knew it wasn't ours to keep. It belonged to what we fought for." I couldn't speak. The breath caught in my throat. Ruth touched my arm. "He didn't want to burden you. He just wanted to protect the story. And maybe give you a way to let go." Let go. How do you let go of a ghost that built the wall around your heart? I spent so many months chasing justice for what Karen destroyed. But now, holding David's words, I realized something deeper. This wasn't just about revenge. It wasn't even about HOA policies or lawsuits. It was about legacy, and maybe grace. But of course, the universe wasn't done with Karen just yet. A month later, I received a call from a local filmmaker who had heard about the story through one of Ruth's nonprofit colleagues. She wanted to create a short documentary on the incident focused not just on the conflict, but on healing. "Would you be willing," she asked gently, "to let us film part of it here? Maybe even include some voices from the community?" I hesitated. I wasn't looking to go viral. I wasn't interested in revenge porn disguised as activism. But then she said something that stuck with me. The world needs stories where people fight back but still choose to build afterward. So I agreed. The film crew came. They interviewed Ruth, my mom, Mr. Eldridge, even the contractor nephew Joel, who gave a surprisingly vulnerable interview about being manipulated into destruction, because I didn't want to disappoint family. But the most unexpected twist? Karen sent a message. Through her lawyer. It wasn't an apology. Not exactly. But it was something else. A typed letter. And signed. It said, "I lost control. I thought I was preserving order. I didn't see what I was destroying. But I see it now. I have to live with that." Some people said I should burn the letter. Others said I should post it online and let the public decide whether it was real or crocodile tears. But instead, I tucked it into a sealed envelope and buried it behind the new memorial wall, beneath the foundation stone. I didn't do it for her. I did it because I needed to move forward. And for once maybe that was enough. The documentary aired 2 months later. It was titled Stone and Spirit, What We Leave Behind. The final scene showed the restored wall, the plaque, and a wide aerial shot of the street where it all began. A A single white folding chair sat where Karen's SUV once tore through the stones. Empty, quiet, and on the screen, a final message appeared. When legacy is threatened by ego, what will you defend, your fence or your faith? The outpouring was massive. We received hundreds of letters, some from families of veterans, others from refugees around the country. One woman wrote, "I never knew what happened to my father's translator. Your story helped me believe someone, somewhere, still remembers." And then there were the messages from inside the HOA world. Other residents, other victims, other Karens, some asking for advice, others confessing to past mistakes. It was more than I expected, more than I could carry alone. So I didn't. We turned part of the southern lot into a gathering space, a place for monthly dialogue. No microphones, no cameras, just folding chairs, community stories, and one guiding question. What do we build now? Ruth now runs that circle. My mother attends when she's strong enough. Sometimes she brings cookies. Other times she just sits quietly and watches the wind move through the iron gate. And me? I go most nights, just to sit on the stone bench and listen. To the birds, to the neighbors, to the silence David left behind that no longer feels so empty. But I'll tell you this much. If Karen ever watches that film, if she ever drives by and sees what stood in place of her ego, if she ever wonders what happened to her throne of rules and punishments, I hope she realizes one thing. She tried to erase a man's legacy. But in doing so, she helped cement it deeper than she could have imagined. What would you have done if your enemy destroyed something sacred and gave you the microphone afterward? Let's talk about it. Is there ever justice without understanding? Or does healing mean leaving room for the broken even if they never say sorry? 2 seasons passed. The sanctuary became more than a symbol, it became a rhythm. Weddings, veteran vigils, even school field trips. A place where people weren't just told what was allowed, they were asked what they needed. But one evening, just as the last light slipped through the trees and the stones cast long shadows, Ruth found me again. She was holding something different this time. It wasn't a letter. It was a key. "A package came in from Jerusalem," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "To me, but it's addressed to you. From David." My heart skipped. She placed the worn, wrapped parcel in my hands. Inside was a small, olive-wood box carved with 2 Hebrew letters, a sacred abbreviation of God's name. The key inside was old, maybe antique, and attached to a braided paracord loop. Beneath it, a slip of paper in David's handwriting. "For the final gate." I stared at it, stunned. Final gate. Ruth nodded slowly. I didn't know what it meant until I found this. She handed me a second envelope, this one older, sealed and yellowed with time. The handwriting on the front wasn't David's. It was our father's. I hadn't seen his name written since his funeral. He passed before David ever enlisted, before the world turned upside down. But somehow here it was, like a ghost stepping out of the dust. I opened it. Inside was a letter that made my knees buckle. "To my sons, one of you will build, one of you will protect. That is the way. But someday the protector may also have to choose what to release. And if he does, he must give the key, not to the gate but to the person who remembers why the gate was built in the first place." I looked up at Ruth, eyes stinging. She nodded. "I think he meant me." The air was still. No wind. Just the steady hum of insects, of earth, of legacy whispering through time. David hadn't just left me with memory. He'd left me with choice. It was never about revenge. Not really. It wasn't even about defending a wall or taking down a Karen. It was about surrendering control so something greater could grow in its place. I held the key up to the fading light. His teeth shimmered in gold and rust. "Do you know where it goes?" I asked. Ruth smiled. "I think it's up to you." We buried the key under the newest olive tree we planted at the edge of the sanctuary. Not as a treasure, not as a weapon, but as a seed of remembrance. If someone found it decades from now, let them ask not what it opened but who locked it in the first place. The land, our land, was no longer just soil and stone. It was story. And that was the final twist. Karen thought she was erasing something ugly from her HOA-approved reality. She saw the memorial as an eyesore, a rebellion against conformity, a threat to her illusion of control. But what she really did, she opened the gates to something so much bigger than herself. And she lost everything in the process. Not because she was punished but because she refused to learn. Her final fate came quietly, a footnote buried in a local court docket. HOA fraud, 3 years probation, mandatory community service. No media, no confessions, just silence, collapse behind closed doors. And yet, part of me still wonders if she drives by, if she sees the crowds under the olive trees, if she hears the laughter echoing between the stones she tried to shatter, if she remembers the gate she tore down. Because here's the truth. You can't destroy something sacred just because you don't understand it. And you can't silence legacy with a clipboard and a bolt cutter. Legacy finds a way. It grows through cracks in limestone and speaks through those brave enough to listen. So now I ask you, what would you choose? Would you lock the gate to protect what you built? Or hand the key to someone else and trust that they'll know how to open something better? Let me know. Because somewhere out there, another Karen is holding a clipboard. And somewhere out there, someone like David is building a gate. Let's make sure we know which one we are when that moment comes.